Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Chris Jackson, and Fred and I were just starting to talk about the 2023 rendition of the Reliability and Maintainability Symposium.
You know, I've seen it, like it's been, 50, 60 years they've been running this thing, 70 years. And that the acronym has changed a couple of times over the years. It was at once, availability was in there. I saw that on one version of it, yeah. And it might have been a mistake by whoever was setting up that day's, promotional stuff, but
right.
Who knows? But
it could be. I mean, RAM is a well-known reliability, availability, and maintainability acronym across the industry. So I know I've made that mistake, especially early on in my RAMS career.
But I do remember that they got a letter from the Rams, I think it was the Los Angeles Rams football team, saying that they needed to be careful not to trot on their copyright or trademark or whatever, something like that. And apparently they ended up with a couple lawyers talking and said, well, I don't think there's any confusion. There's a bunch of reliability engineer types that hang out and talk about technology and papers and failure rates and stuff like that. And you guys play football. So I don't think it's going to be a problem. And so they all agreed to agree. Yeah.
I concur. There is not even a passing resemblance to anything athletic. The Rams.
Was that pun intended?
Nope. Yes.
So anyway, the conference drives on, and I'm looking for where they're going to do their call for papers so we can get it up on the site and let people know where they can do their thing. It's still pretty much a paper-driven, tutorial infested. I think this year I saw a bunch of notices that they had a CRE track, which I didn't get a lot of details on, except it was looked like one conference room that was full-time, one topic after another for the whole conference. I got a note from a newsletter from the ASQ's, I think it's Reliability and Risk Division, saying it was a great conference, brilliant papers, all other stuff, which kind of contradicts our earlier conversation about what you were seeing there. So it's like, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, and I suppose, spoiler alert, some of the things, at least I'm going to be talking about, aren't particularly complimentary of RAMS, the organisation itself. We know that the board and the management committee are scratching their heads as to why they're not getting nearly as many papers as they used to. The RAMS attendees, let's just call it the sort of people who've been there for more than one season, they know exactly why their papers aren't coming through the way they used to. And it points to a bigger issue, really. The leadership of the organisation is you've got a board of directors who are isolated from the rest of the conference because they don't want to be part of the conference. That's as simple as that. And then we can talk about all the issues that emanate from that. The reality is they, let's be honest, they see themselves as this is their little holiday. We barely see them. It's the management committee who aren't the board of directors who do all the work. And with their own private functions going on and their extra size rooms that they get as perks for signing the contracts from the hotels, it's not a good culture. There's very much a small group of people who on the board who enjoy this sort of thing. Their families get rooms even, and it's starting to leave a very sour taste in the mouths of a lot of regular attendees, because it used to be about the conference and the quality of the papers and everything else, but it's not anymore.
Well, I take it hasn't changed then since I was involved with all that stuff. Do they still do the banquet where you have a paid bar for the attendees that you have to wait outside, and then when you walk in, the management team and the board of directors are all already inside and seated at all the best tables.
Correct.
Yeah.
In their tuxedos.
Yeah.
So everyone else is in, just say, casual business, and you have the board of directors in tuxedos.
Yeah, and they have a private open bar, or I guess it's called open bar, cocktail party prior. They're off in some other room, and one of the jobs of the management committee is in the hotel is figure out a secret way to get into the banquet without having to go through the masses. And I like,
absolutely.
What? You're asking me for what?
And that's the heart of it. There's you have people who are making the key strategic decisions who have got no idea what the sentiment across the across the wider group is. There is no constitution or anything like that which says what good and bad performance is. I mean, this year's hotel was in a mall, in a shopping mall. Now, how the hell does that attract, people who, and there's multiple reliability conferences across the world. If one's on a beach in Hawaii versus one in a mall in Florida, and people are umming and ahhing about which one to go to, it's the one in Hawaii, or the one which has some more, more entertainment to it. Don't get me wrong, it's not as if that's my only complaint about what's going on, but it's just one of the many symptoms about how we have clear divergence between the board of directors and what they want and what the rest of the attendees want in terms of quality, and papers and tutorials and things like that. I know that they are scratching their heads as to wondering why a lot of paper authors are withdrawing their papers after the second review. And the reason being is because the review committee aren't doing their job, and it's not the fact that authors are pulling their papers. It's because the review committee essentially, after the first round of reviews, they'll just simply say, oh, it's still not up to speed, or it's still not a good quality paper. You need to keep making changes. What are those changes? As per the first round of reviews. But I've already responded to those, and I've already got a blurb for each one of those issues. I've addressed them. Which ones have I addressed? Which ones haven't I addressed? Which ones do I need to address further? Which ones do we have just a difference in philosophy, which means we can then discuss it? Oh, no, you just haven't done what you need to do. And without any guidance like that, you just can't proceed. And there are a number of people who I know who have written papers, myself included, who simply said, well, I'm not going to throw a dart over my shoulder and you tell me if it hits a dartboard or not. I don't have time to deal with this nonsense. Do your job, tell me what the issue is, and we can talk about it. But if you're not telling me what the issue is, then the paper stands as is. And of course, that after that happens, the paper reviewer says, author withdrew paper, which is just clearly not true. And it's fundamentally because we have too many reviewers who have just simply got their own view own worldview on what should be written and what shouldn't be written. And if it doesn't align with their worldview, they don't like it and they say no. And if you say, well, this is this is my paper, this expresses my thoughts, well, so if you don't change it, I'm not going to be accepted. Well, I can't change it because you can't tell me what's wrong with it apart from you don't like it. Oh, therefore you're withdrawing it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I've got this very toxic review process, amongst other things. The board of directors who don't speak to anybody don't understand what's really going on, and we're seeing year after year fewer and fewer papers being submitted. There are plenty of annual paper writers who just don't do it anymore, myself included. I just don't have the time to waste with idiots. I'm a parent. I only have a certain amount of time to deal with idiots during daylight hours. I've got kids.
Yeah, no. If it's any condolences to you, Chris, years and years ago, I wrote a paper for him, and the paper got accepted. And the review process was pretty benign. It wasn't a big, huge process. But then I think it was in September or something like that, they wanted the presentations to review those. So I sent them a typical presentation I do, which has got like 3 words on it, and maybe a graphic. They're not information dense. I always considered the papers or the presentations to be a support for the presentation, which is the heart of it. And if you really want to dive into it, read the paper. I'm not going to reprint the paper on my slides, right, which you do see quite a few of. And they wrote back, says, your presentation is not acceptable. There's no content in it. And I sent back to them the guidelines that they had made available for how to create your presentation. Is use large font visible from the back of the room. Don't crowd your slides. Do this, do that. One concept per slide, everything else. And sent that back to him and said, I'm only following your guidelines. Unlike most of the presentations I've seen in past RAMs. And that got rejected. Well, I happen to know who was the chair of that particular committee for that year, and wrote to them, and they said, no, you're all right. You're fine.
Right.
But I knew who to call,
That's it. Yeah.
But if it wasn't like, it's not acceptable. There's no content there. And I says, well, that's kind of opposite of what you're asking for. But there were so many different little things about RAMs that just irked me, and I know got under your skin a couple of times. It's like doing the Pledge of Allegiance at the banquet. Hopefully they stop that.
They did stop that. I must say, this year's banquet was a breath of fresh air, because the keynote speaker was, what's his name, Don, forget his name. He's a former Silicon Valley engineer, but now a stand-up comedian. And he was hilarious. He was funny.
Yeah.
He actually knew some of the people there, or at least worked in the labs that some of the people had worked in previously, which was fantastic. Years gone by, they just had random people turn up. I remember we had essentially a former astronaut turn up and just talk about flying planes in the Air Force and stuff like that, which is, on the surface of it, interesting. But this is a reliability symposium. It's just, why are we spending so much money on this it's not adding to the reliability body of knowledge you walk away from the symposium with. A couple of years ago, it was just a guy who started his own aircraft company, I should say, and he just gave us a biography of what he did, and go, how is this adding value to my life? It's not. The good chunk of my registration money is going towards paying him to come here. Why are we dealing with these peripheral experts which aren't talking to the key topic or the key reason why we're here? Which brings me to my next point, is you have the board of directors just label each RAMS with a certain theme, but then do absolutely nothing to make the next symposium have anything to do with that theme. I remember the last model-based systems engineering was in Palm Springs. And a lot of companies sent their people for the first time to RAMS ever, because they wanted to learn how to make reliability a part of model-based systems engineering, or vice versa. But there was no real, it was just, the
opening presentation didn't talk about it. The
Right.
panels didn't talk about it. There was no track of papers that talked about it.
No, and these people were angry, like, especially the managers, because they had some of the lower level employees didn't matter too much because there's nothing they could do. So they had a 4-day paid holiday at Palm Springs. But the managers who have a finite conference and training budget, who I was speaking to, were just visibly angry and essentially accusing the committee of theft, because it's false advertising in a way, just to try and get people to turn up and then not have the promised product on hand when they do arrive. And now we've got those people who leave the conference, or symposium, I should say, they have a really bad experience. And if anyone asks them in the future, what's this RAMS all about, they're going to have a very emotional, visceral reaction to it, which is going to make it even harder to get people and then papers moving forward. It's just all bad. And it starts with the board of directors, who are essentially taking the money and splurging on themselves and their family with all the hotel kickbacks, and just don't turn up. They have their own private functions, don't turn up. They have no idea what's going on with the sentiment of the organisation. They just have their own meetings and just complain bitterly and admire problems, but they don't even know what's going on because they don't want to. They're just not those people. And they need to go.
I was on the management committee, I don't know, almost 15 years, or at least 10 years. I lost track. They kind of blur together. And the board of directors and they're representatives from I think there's currently 8 different organizations that sponsor RAMS. And they kick in a little bit of money. And then they have representatives from those organizations that tend to stay on that committee for as long as they want once they get appointed.
Yep.
And then they hold meetings during RAMS about, well, where's the next RAMS going to be, or what's the contract, what's the hotel we're going to pick for the next time we're on the East Coast, and they have presentations, and then they have how's the budget looking, and they do all kinds of weird stuff like that. I don't know exactly what all those meetings are for, or what they're about, but and then they spear off every now and then, to use one of your terms, Chris, is they many of the board members also then have best paper for their different organizations. They have all these different, best paper or best presentation or this, that, or the other thing. So they go off and judge stuff like that. They show up in a room for a paper or a presentation, and then they're out of there to the next one, and so on. So they're busy. They definitely are busy. It doesn't mean they have to do it while they're there. They could pick a hotel. I always had the contention that they shouldn't be picking a new hotel every time. They should pick one chain and go to the same place, because a good amount of the headaches of setting up and running the conference is figuring out how to put it in that space. If you find a conference center that meets your needs, just go back there. I've been involved with other conferences that do that, and it saves them, one, a ton of money, because you can do a longer term contract with one group. And two, the space, the staff, it's easy. It just is straight easy. And you don't need 40 people micromanaging every detail of it. You could probably do it with 3 people. As I've witnessed other large conferences done that way. But it's got a long history being run by a committee, and we know how well committees work, so.
Right, and the reason why that will never happen, the way you described it, have a long-term contract, is because, and letting the cat out of the bag, the hotels clamber for these sorts of conferences. Having 600 to 1,000 people turn up and pay for accommodation is absolute gravy for hotels. And so what they try to do is influence the decision makers with kickbacks. They'll splurge them with trips across the US, free rooms for their family when they do pick up the hotel, or they do pick their hotel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's in the interest of the select group and the board of directors to have essentially hotels bidding for their time, attendance year after year, because every time there is a bidding process, they get these, let's call them bribes. They're flat out bribes. In any other country, if we were looking at any other country or any other so-called third world country, we'd say, oh, that's very clear corruption, it's bribes, conflict of interest and everything else. And that happens. And so the more times you get hotels fighting for your business, the more kickbacks you get. So what you're saying, Fred, will never happen, which is why, going back to the fact there's no constitution, there should be a constitution which says you aren't allowed to ever receive any sort of free services or free things from the hotels if you're part of the selection committee. That is a clear no-no. If you found out to have ever done that, you'll be removed forthwith. There needs to be more transparency. What rooms do the board of directors get when they turn up? And I've seen, for example, 2-story apartments given to board of director members, essentially free. And it's just obscene. And that's where registration money is going towards. It's all this kickback, all these bribes that are happening. And so, yeah, I fully agree that you should find some, even if it's not the same hotel, but the same hotel chain, get them to bid for once for 5 years. You'll get some, you obviously have some benefits in terms of economy of scale, get some discounts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's for the benefit of the symposium, not for the benefit of the individuals and the board of directors who, as you correctly point out, essentially only get removed once they die, which is the next issue. There's no voting. There's no meritocracy. It's if you somehow claw your way or sit on that board of directors representing society XYZ, unless you die or perhaps murder someone, you're not getting off that board, which is not how the real world should work. And this is why we have all these issues.
Not totally true. I did fire one when I was the chair of the reliability division. Asked him to step away. it was the conflict of interest. He was looking at RAMS to promote his own business, and I'm like, yeah, that's it. Buy a booth, go to the trade show,
Right.
Not put up posters in all the rooms that tout your business. I don't think that's the idea here, guys. But it's one of those things that the various committees that support RAMS or IEEE and ASQ and then the others, the conference is a moneymaker for them most years, not every year. The one when everything got locked down and nobody was traveling, that was a tougher year to make any money. But the idea is that the conference in and of itself is the management team of it and the board of directors are under a nonprofit. And so they zero-sum game every year. So every year they go to the different 8 sponsoring groups and say, hey, we need some money to seed this thing and get it started. And they wrote one of their bylaws or one of their objectives is to double the return. So you get if you put in $5,000, you're going to get back the 5,000 plus 10,000. And it used to be a break even back to the organizations. And they says, no, we're not going to support it if it's just break even. We have to make money. And so there's no free lunches. There's no, breakfast made available for the symposium attendees. There's one thing after another, it gets stripped away. And I went to a similar size conference that was more aimed at the maintenance world. And all of that extra money didn't go back to the organizers. They ran it to break even. And
right.
The difference in the perks and the benefits and the quality of the entire operation was for the attendees' benefit. And so it was because they had the money to do it. And somewhere along the line, it was before my time, that got lost. It was seen as a money generator. And unfortunately, it drives a lot of really poor decisions, in my opinion. But I have often heard, and I stepped away from the conference when I was getting into a spot where I could start making changes and make differences. And I thought, I don't want to take on that battle. It's a volunteer position, and I don't want the headache. So, moving on, go do something else. But that's I very much doubt that we'll get board of directors, the current management committee team and senior leadership of that group to respond to this, basically a rant.
Yeah.
But I think they have to make changes and substantial operational changes to actually improve the conference for the people that go there to benefit. And like you said, Chris, why is there a team of close to 50 people that many are just volunteers. And when you first get in the committee, it's like, I get to help with, selecting papers and doing stuff like that. And it really doesn't need that many people.
No, so again, it's all about, you talk about conflict of interest. It's why should we be making money for these for these societies? I mean, ballpark, how much does each society give, do you reckon?
Well, I'd have to look it up if I even still have that paperwork, but it was on the order of like $5,000, and so that's times 8. And
right, so
or it might be, and that's enough to enter contracts with the audiovisual team and for the photographer, videographer, with the hotel, get them started, make the early payments, that kind of stuff. And then as the registration fees start coming in, then they can pay off the other bills, which is very, very common. There's the seed money, and then there's bills that come up, and the registrations start to cover those. And then there's the final bill with the hotel. And so it's, and then where the profit is it's the balance between where do they spend money, where do they have commitments with the hotel's contract, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the day, after a couple of weeks after the conference, they close the books and disperse the funds back to the sponsoring committees or societies. And sometimes they can get quite a bit of money, because I think there was one in Nevada that was deemed one of the most profitable ever, and they were getting like $30,000-$40,000 back each. And we're in a casino.
Yeah.
Like that. Okay.
And it's just wrong. It's just wrong, because then it turns into
it's not a nonprofit in mindset
right.
at that point.
And that means that the decision to drop registration fees to allow more access is completely goes against the what the board members get personally rewarded for. And so it's just an awful situation. I mean, I don't want to drop too many names. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to rant in the similar vein we have if we got them on. But until they give us that permission, I won't drop their names. And the names I would drop, most people would be very well aware of them in the reliability committee, industry, I should say. But it's all the same sentiment. We talked about the reduction of quality over the years. You got board of directors who treat this as their holiday plaything. They're there to make money for their societies. They're there not to reinvest that money into improving the conference. The management committee, they're the ones who work hard. They're the volunteers who work hard, but essentially they have precious little executive say over anything. They're the ones who get worked to the bone. It is awful, and it is a recipe for failure. And the number of times I've been at conversations at this RAMS, they say, "Why don't you organise a different competing symposium?" I'll be honest, that sort of thing sounds very appealing to me professionally and personally, because there needs to be a preeminent symposium-like activity for reliability stuff. But that needs to come along with whoever's in charge, a board, they do need to get remunerated in a way for their time within reason. And they're not charities, but they also need to maintain the volunteer spirit. There shouldn't be any sort of it should be entirely non-profit. That seed money of $40K, do you know what? I reckon if we were to go across the people we know in the industry and say, would you like to donate to a Symposium XYZ trust? Here's the trust documents which say how the money can and can't be spent. It's essentially the seed money each year and blah, blah, blah. I reckon we get $40K in a heartbeat. But there is, and look at tutorials as well. Tutorials are given to, many tutorials are given to friends of the management committee / board of directors, because as soon as you become a tutorial presenter, you don't have to pay registration. And full disclosure, I am a tutorial presenter, but I would also argue that I take that very seriously. I've always got good feedback with the audio visual stuff, and it's actually a presentation, like you say, Fred. It's not a bunch of dot points on a PowerPoint slide that I turn around and look at every time I forget what the next thing I need to say is. And the feedback that myself and Carl get for our tutorials is just awesome. It really is awesome. It also means that when we get that feedback, the attendees also spill the beans on their thoughts regarding the other tutorials as well. We just know there's a huge systemic problem that the current structure and strategy and philosophy of this symposium is not geared towards resolving anytime soon. It's just sad.
Yeah, well, so it goes. If you've listening to this, if you've been to RAMS, let us know. What's your take on it? What do you think needs to change, or what needs to be kept? What needs to happen? And what's your take on it? If you've gone to a really great conference that was all around good educational experience, good networking opportunities, good content and operation of it. Which one was that? Which ones stand out? Let's talk about the ones that are doing a good job and get those in the airways here, so others can learn about it and have options that they should really consider. So let us know. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. Chris and I, like the other hosts of the show, are available through LinkedIn or our About pages over at Accendo. So we look forward to hearing from you, and might even see you at a conference in the future.
Absolutely. Rant over.
Rant over. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Got that off your chest, I think. We'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.